Hi, and welcome to In Air's Kitchen. Today we're going to make whoopie pies, and this is something we've had at Clover for a really long time. I think maybe the first sweet we had was cupcakes, which we used to do for people's birthdays, and then we started doing whoopie pies at some point. I don't remember why, but we did it on the truck. I think it was a fun New England sweet that we thought people could enjoy. Whoopie pies are from Maine. Some people say they're from Pennsylvania, but from everything I've looked at, they're from Maine, not Pennsylvania. And when we started making whoopie pies, if you haven't had whoopie pie, you'll see what they are by the end of the show. But it's sort of like giant cookie with creamy filling. And when we first started making whoopie pies, we were trying to figure out a recipe for it, and we ended up adapting that recipe that I showed earlier. It's called Wacky Cake, and we adapted that recipe to become whoopie pies for Clover. And so that recipe will help you make these. And I have some of these out already because you can't fill them when they're hot. So we'll talk a little bit more about those. So those are going to be our whoopie pies. These ones are bigger. The scoop I have, scoop we use at Clover is sort of in between two scoops I have at home. So I was playing around with those. So we got two different size whoopie pies to fill in. And I'll go through what that recipe is. And then we had this idea. We had all this fluff. Our refrigerator is full of fluff. Because Clementine invented the fluff, so that was one batch, and then she did a test batch to figure out if she knew what the recipe was, so that was a second batch. And then we did a batch on the show, so we had 3 batches of fluff. We've given fluff to friends, we've eaten a lot of fluff, we made cake, but we used that for the frosting, and I was thinking it could be a really delicious filling for whoopie pies. At Clover, we do a different kind of filling. We use cream cheese and butter and heavy whipping cream, all 3 of those. So it's a very heavy, very delicious filling. And we're not doing that filling today, in part because I don't have a lot of butter, cream cheese, and whipping cream. Also because I do have a bunch of fluff. So it's part of home cooking is you use what you have. And these are going to be really, really delicious and are a great thing to follow along if you've already made the fluff. If you haven't made the fluff, go back. It's shockingly easy to make at home. It's an awesome recipe Clementine came up with, and I thought it'd be appropriate if she helped us guide us through the making of the whoopie pies. Let's just go through what you're going to need for the ingredients. So you're going to need all-purpose flour. So I've got some flour right here. You're going to need white sugar, which I have right here. So you're going to need white sugar for this. You're going to need a little bit of salt, and you're going to need baking soda. So not baking powder, but baking soda. You're going to need oil and vinegar. And you're going to need cocoa powder. And I think I left the cocoa powder out of this. Oops. Let me write that down here. So it's going to be all right. Sorry, I was just writing that up before the show from my memory, and I just realized I think I left the cocoa powder out. And we're going to need water. So that's what you're going to need at home to make this. Hopefully most of these are pantry items you have. These happen to be the exact same ingredients we use to make the wacky cake. And for those of you who already made the wacky cake, I'll just point out the differences here. If you haven't made the wacky cake, this is going to be sufficient. You can just watch what we're doing here and make it from here. But if you've already made the wacky cake, which is really, really yummy and delicious, the differences here are mostly the amount of liquid, so we're doing a little bit less water. And that's the big change. The other change is I've doubled the recipe, and the reason I've done that is the wacky cake, it just doesn't make very many whoopie pies the way it's written, so we just doubled it. The last difference is when you're making the wacky cake, you make it in a baking pan. It's some recipe my grandma used to really like because you didn't dirty any dishes when you made this. And this one, we are going to be scooping these out on a baking sheet. So we're not making this in a cake pan. Instead, we're going to mix it all in a bowl, and then we're going to chill it and scoop it out on a sheet later. So it's a little bit different that way, too. All right, this is whoopie pies. You ready to get going?
Yeah.
All right. So let's start out with putting flour in there. So you're going to do 3 cups of all-purpose flour. Now, I'm going to set the oven over here to 350 degrees so it can preheat. And then we're going to need a baking sheet, and we're going to need some parchment paper. But the batter we're making is going to need to rest in the refrigerator for a little while. So at Clover, we rest it for a full hour, and so you don't need to rush on these things. You may not even set your oven until later. Today we're going to do it all at once, but But normally you might make this first, put it in the fridge for an hour, then set your oven and take it out. So you got 3 cups there?
It's just 2.
2, okay.
I don't want to overload the sifter.
So the main reason we're sifting, sifting can be really helpful with lots of baking recipes. And what it does is it breaks up any clumps in the flour, and it can make the flour a little fluffier, aerate it a little bit. And there's another thing that the sifting can do, and that's the thing that matters to us most today, which is, all right, hold on there, Clemmy, don't go too far. Do you see the baking? So, the other thing it can do for us is we need to put baking soda in this. And baking soda is going to be a really small quantity compared to the total dry ingredients. We've got 3 cups of flour and 2 cups of sugar. And so if we just put in the 2 teaspoons baking soda directly into the bowl, you may find that some clumps, in fact, I mean, you can even see this is very common for baking soda. See these big clumps in there? And so those clumps, these clumps can just fall into your dough, and then it doesn't react the way it should because that clump is like not mixed in. And so it might go all the way through the baking process and you've got a big clump of baking soda. Also, when you bite into it, it tastes terrible. So you've got like a double whammy where it doesn't do what you want and it does something you don't want. So when you sift it, that helps break up that baking soda. So I almost never use baking soda without sifting it. And here we can see, slow down. See, there's some clumps of baking soda. And then what we'll just do is just press those through with our fingers. And we definitely don't want to, with the baking soda, if we turned it over, we would just be dumping those chunks in. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure it goes through the sifter so that we get it all broken up. And then when we mix that, it's going to mix in really nicely. So,
Cocoa powder?
yeah, cocoa powder it is. Here's what do you need?
4th.
4th. Yep, awesome. And we already have sugar down. Cool. So we're making all the dry ingredients first. And then we're going to make a well in the middle. But we're going to put the liquid ingredients into that well. And if anybody has questions, feel free to ask them. We'll check it out later. And that can be questions about this recipe or one of the other recent shows if you've been trying some of these things at home. All right. So we've got, we need to put some sugar in here now. Yeah, do you want to do it? You want me to? So this thing that just came out, that's a vanilla pod. And that's a fun trick, is if you put a spent vanilla bean in your sugar will gain a slightly vanilla-y taste, which is really yummy. And we're out of that. I think I might have to grab some more sugar. Yeah. Be right back. I think I've got some in the basement.
Whoopie Pies.
All right. We're in birthday season right now, so we've really been going through lots of sugar, but have another bag. I want to fill this first. Okay. All right, so you can go ahead and mix that all. So Clem's just mixing all the dry ingredients right now. So you just can mix it until it's all incorporated. And this is an important step too, because once we add the liquid, if you overmix it, you can make it really tough, which we don't want to do. So doing a really good job mixing that right now avoids us overmixing it once the liquids have been added. So we want to get that so it's all mixed nicely. Does that seem good? Now we're going to make a well in the middle. You want to make a little, it's going to be a good size well actually. I said little, but it's not that little. You got it? And then we're going to put some water in that well. So this is the big place that we're stepping away from the whoopie pie recipe, in that we're putting a little less water in this one. Okay. And then, do you want to go ahead and put some oil in there? This is a vegan recipe until we add the fluff. But the cake itself, it happens to be vegan. Sure, go ahead. All right, and then we're gonna add a little bit of vanilla. It's just vanilla extract. It smells so good. Doesn't it always smell like something you want to eat?
Good.
Smells really good. All right, and then we need to add some vinegar. You want to do that? Okay. Awesome. All right, nice job. So now that everything's added, Clementine's gonna go ahead and mix it all at once. Sorry, get that out of your way. And she's going to try to get that all the way mixed, but not over mixed. Let me take a peek there. So let me take a quick look. So you can see there's like a little bit of like dry stuff there. Down at the very bottom, there's a little bit of wet. So we just want to get it to the point where all of that is fully incorporated. But we don't want to go longer than we have to. So there's a lot of baking things that are like this. You don't really want to make the gluten come out. You don't want to knead this into a bread dough, but you don't want to leave it unmixed either. So this is a really good state. You can see there's a little bit of a glossy sheen. It looks thicker than the batter was for the wacky cake. So if you see me pull some up, it's sort of clumpier. And that's exactly where we want that to be for right now. So what we do with this is put this in the refrigerator and wait about an hour. That's what we do at Clover. You can rush this at home, but that is like the ideal amount of time we'll let it rest. That might be easier to do if you're at a restaurant preparing these ahead of time versus at home. Maybe you've got hungry mouths or something. So if you push it a little bit, it'll be okay, but they will bake up a little differently. You get better doming once the batter's chilled. So let's go ahead now. Clem, if you want to grab that batter from the fridge.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get parchment paper ready. So what we're doing with this is mostly we're saving the pan so that it's not going to be a big cleanup. We're making it so it's going to be easy to remove these later. Putting a little oil on this parchment paper. And so all this is just for ease of release. I just don't want this to be really hard when it comes out to release, because you'll see we have to take them off of the pan while they're still hot, and they're pretty fragile at that point in time. So this is going to help them come off really easily. Now the next thing we're going to do, and I wonder how many should we make? I want to make a bunch of them. You want to get a second sheet pan from there? We can fill that up. All right. So this is the batter. It's been chilled. It's the same exact batter we just made. I just did this an hour ago. And I was practicing, as you can see, and we're going to fill some of those. This scoop here, this ice cream scoop, is the one that made that big one. And this scoop here is the one that made those smaller ones. I think I like the smaller one a little better in size. So I think I'll make those today. And you can see the scoop that made those. This scoop isn't quite as... At Clover we have one like this, but it's a little bit smaller, and that would be what I'd ideally use, but I just don't have that at home. So I'm going to take...
Like the smaller one.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you can use any kind of oil to prep your baking sheet. The idea is just to get some fat there between the whoopie pie and the baking sheet. Now, when I'm putting these down, I don't want to put them too close to one another because they will spread out. So you can see I'm handling them more than I normally would because at Clover we'd use a slightly smaller scoop that has a release on it, and we'd scoop them and release, and they would just be perfect little domes. But in this case, I'm having to improvise with this ice cream scoop that doesn't have a release on it. So do your best. If you need to use spoons, you can do that too. And go ahead and do this one. Try to make these in even numbers because you're gonna need an even number to match them up. Hey, bud. And I'm just gonna wash this a little bit because it's getting a little sticky for me. All right, so I just washed it. Now it's wet. It's probably gonna give me a little bit better control. And these are gonna bake very quickly. So I'm doing 5 of these on one sheet, 5 on the other sheet. That's gonna give me 10 halves. But since you put them together to make the whoopie pie, this will be just the right number of whoopie pies for our family. Of course, you can also make these smaller or larger, or you can split them in half and share them with somebody. Sometimes I'll bring one home on a Friday from Clover and we'll split it up, but I think when I bring one home for each person, the kids are a lot happier. So here we have our whoopie pies. They're all measured out. They're like doming up. We want that, and they're gonna settle down a little bit as they're being baked. So I'm gonna put them into a 350-degree oven, and go ahead and put them in. Now I'm gonna set a timer for 8 minutes. Count down 8 minutes. That seems to work like half of the time. Count down 8 minutes. Okay. So that's counting down the bake time. When they come out, we need to cool them before we can fill them. So I thought what we'd do for the show today is I thought we'd fill these ones here. Violet might scare some of you. She just had her birthday, and my sister sent this gigantic gun. I just saw her run through the porch with a giant Nerf gun. Hey. Do you want to show them your giant Nerf gun? No? Alright. It's huge. It's like as big as she is. I think I must have done something that my sister's getting even with me for. Do you want to get the Fluff out?
Sure.
So for the Fluff, we're going to use this scoop that has the release. And we're basically just going to scoop it into the middle of the cookie. And then we're going to put the other half on. So this assembly part's pretty simple. And you could use other kinds of fillings. Fluff isn't the only choice, but Clementine brought me some colorful fluff too. That's fun.
The white fluff left.
Okay. So I'm just going to take a nice big scoop of that. I'm going to put that there. And then we're just going to bring those together. I'm doing a little twisting action, which allows that to come together nicely without smushing out the side too much. But we have a beautiful whoopie pie right there. And let's do another one. Do you want to do one, Clem?
Sure.
Okay, go for it. Which color? You can do white. Why don't you do another white one? Go grab your giant Nerf gun.
Okay.
Yeah. You can do a stick up. Awesome. And these are found throughout Maine. You may have seen them if you've been driving through the state or if you're from Maine. They're often wrapped up in like saran wrap. They keep them moist that way. And but a lot of if you're in the really rural parts of Maine, you can find these in like roadside stands and stuff like that, which is really fun. But if you're buying from like a convenience store, they usually have a lot of preservatives and dope conditioners and other kind of junk in them. And when you make them at home, you can make them any way you want. We have a lot of fun at Clover with different kinds of fillings. If you're familiar with that, you may love those. And you can play around with those here as well. This is also Fluff. This is a purple Fluff. Do you want to try and put some purple Fluff in between one of the big ones? I noticed that. Here, why don't we, maybe we can pull it out of this. There you go. You guys planning an invasion? Are you gonna steal our Whoopie Pies? Whoa, that's like a mega Whoopie Pie. So this is Whoopie Pies at home. This recipe is pretty bomb-proof if you follow it really directly. I wouldn't make a lot of adaptations to it because, but if you follow this exact recipe, I think you'll get some really great results with the cake. Let's take a quick peek at what's in the oven. These are halfway through, so they're only 4 minutes into their 8-minute cooking time, but we should be able to see, there they go, so they're starting to dome out a little bit, and they'll continue to lift up. And when they come out, we'll take them off the baking sheet so that we'll put them right on the cooling rack, and we'll pull them right off the baking sheet right away, so you can see how these were sitting to cool, and that's going to be important to letting them cool really evenly. And that's the episode for today. So thank you for joining us. Whoopie Pies at home. I think we should take a little bite. I may even like this with Fluff better than the other filling. And you can really taste the honey that you used in the Fluff instead of the corn syrup. It's really good. Blue's not gonna want to give it up. You want that? It is really good. That might be one of the best Whoopie Pies ever. But you're gonna have to try it. It's really good. Alright, thank you everybody. We'll be back tomorrow. Cinco de Mayo, we're gonna do enchiladas. So we'll do